Welcome back to the Quantum Slumber, the place where deep ideas get told softly until your mind stops gripping and starts drifting. Tonight, I want to offer you a strange little paradox. Most people believe real change has to be complicated. They assume it requires perfect routines, flawless affirmations, endless visualizations, and a kind of heroic mental effort. Like you're wrestling your life into a new shape. But what if the opposite is true? What if the reason you haven't changed the thing you keep trying to change isn't that you're doing too little, it's that you're doing too much? Because the harder you try to force a new reality, the more noise you generate inside your own system. And noise is sneaky. It can sound like motivation, but feel like tension. It can sound like, I'm going for it, but feel like fear underneath. And when your mind is saying one thing, while your body is bracing for another, your signal splits, it flickers, it scrambles. That's the quiet idea we're exploring tonight. Not how to want something badly, but how to become coherent, clear, steady, aligned, the way a calm radio station comes through clean when you finally tune the dial. And yes, we'll borrow a few quantum metaphors along the way. Not as magic, not as hype, but as a gentle language for possibility, attention, and the moment a scattered life becomes a single direction. If you like slow science stories like this, the kind you can listen to with half-closed eyes, you're welcome to subscribe. And here's a small invitation for the comments. One word, just one. The energy you want to embody this week may be ease, maybe trust, maybe soften. For now, let's begin with the simplest part. The part almost nobody does, because it's so simple it feels unreal. Imagine for a moment that your life is sitting inside a wide, quiet ocean of possibility. Not in a mystical way that asks you to believe harder, but in a plain, almost ordinary way, like standing in a grocery store aisle. Dozens of options are right there on the shelf. Nothing is chosen until a hand reaches out. Nothing becomes your dinner until you commit to one box, one bag, one path. That's the gentle model we're working with tonight. When people hear the phrase quantum field, they often picture something dramatic, sparks, portals, cosmic lightning, but it can be softer than that. You can think of it as a metaphor for possibility itself, a space where many outcomes are available, but only a few become lived experience. And here's the important part. The part that keeps this grounded. Your brain already operates this way. All day long, your mind is running a quiet simulation engine. It predicts what's likely to happen next. It sketches possible conversations before you have them. It imagines consequences before you take a step. It scans memory, measures risk, and then it selects, often without you noticing. That selection becomes your behavior, and your behavior becomes your day. And your day becomes your life. So, when we use the word field, we're not claiming you can bend physical reality with wishful thinking. We're pointing to something more intimate, the way your inner state filters what you notice, what you interpret as possible, and what you repeatedly choose. Possibility is wide, but attention is a spotlight. Most people don't struggle because possibility is absent. They struggle because their spotlight keeps landing on the same few corners. Old evidence, old pain, old patterns. The mind becomes a collector of familiar proofs. See, it didn't work before. See, it's not safe. See, people leave. See, money disappears. See, you can't relax yet. If you've ever tried to stay positive while your body stayed tight, you already understand this. The world can be full of open doors, but if your nervous system is bracing for impact, you will move through that world like someone walking through a storm. You'll miss the quiet invitation. You'll overlook the gentle opportunity. You'll interpret neutral moments as threats. Not because you're broken, because your system is trying to protect you with the tools it has. This is why the field idea matters. It reminds you that in any given moment, there are usually more possibilities available than your current state can perceive. When you're calm, you can see options. When you're flooded, you can only see escape. When you're grounded, you can hold uncertainty without panic. When you're in scarcity, everything looks like a countdown. So, the question becomes, what turns possibility into your reality? In the competitor's language, they call it a clear signal. And even if we keep that as metaphor, it's a useful one. A clear signal means your inner system isn't contradicting itself. It's when your mind isn't chanting one message while your body broadcasts the opposite. It's when you're not speaking confidence through your teeth while your stomach knots in dread. It's when your desire isn't coded in urgency, because urgency feels like lack, like something is missing and you're late to fix it. Clarity in this sense is not loud. It's coherent. It's the difference between a radio station that comes through clean and one that crackles because you're half-tuned, forever adjusting the dial, never staying still long enough to hear the music. Now notice how this reframes manifestation. Instead of convincing the universe, it becomes reducing distortion inside the system. Instead of begging for a different life, it becomes learning how to inhabit the state, the identity, the internal posture of someone who can actually receive that life without flinching. And that's why this idea is both simple and difficult. Simple, because the lever is not out there, it's here. Difficult, because most of us were trained to treat effort like proof of worth. If we're not striving, we feel guilty. If we're not pushing, we feel unsafe. If we're not monitoring results, we feel like we're being careless. But the field doesn't respond to desperation. Desperation is a kind of noise. It scrambles the signal with checking, chasing, and bracing. So tonight, we're not chasing anything. We're just recognizing something. That possibility expands when you soften. That clarity increases when you stop arguing with your own body. That your lived reality is shaped, quietly, steadily, by what your attention selects again and again. And if you can hold that gently, without turning it into another project to perfect, you'll start to sense what the competitor hinted at. The system doesn't respond to force. It responds to clarity. There's a certain kind of effort that feels noble. It looks like discipline. It sounds like determination. It even gets praised in the culture: push through, stay positive, outwork the doubt. But inside the system of your body and mind, that kind of effort can do something quietly destructive. It can become friction. Because forcing isn't the same as choosing. Forcing is what happens when your surface mind tries to drag you somewhere your deeper system doesn't feel safe going yet. It's the voice that says, "I'm fine, I'm confident, I'm abundant," while your chest stays tight and your stomach stays braced. It's the affirmation repeated like a spell, while a hidden part of you whispers, "I don't believe this. Don't get your hopes up." And that mismatch between what you're saying and what you're actually broadcasting doesn't create power. It creates static. If you've ever watched someone smile while their eyes look tired, you know the feeling. The words are polished, but the signal underneath is honest. Your nervous system works the same way. It reads tone before language. It reads safety before slogans. It reads what you expect before what you claim you want. This is why people can do everything right and still feel stuck. They visualize a beautiful outcome, but the visualization is held in a clenched fist. They write perfect goals, but each sentence carries a quiet panic. What if it never happens? What if I can't handle it? What if I lose it again? They try to think positive, but their body keeps living in defense mode, scanning for threats, rehearsing worst-case scenarios, measuring every day like it's a test. That's not failure. That's physiology. When your system is stressed, it narrows the world. It doesn't care about vision boards. It cares about survival. It prioritizes control, certainty, and short-term relief. So even if your conscious mind is reaching toward expansion, more love, more money, more freedom, your deeper wiring may be gripping the old timeline, because the old timeline is familiar. Familiar can feel safer than better. And here's the subtle trap. Forcing often feels like progress. It feels like you're doing something. You're moving, you're trying, you're working the method. But if the effort is coming from fear, fear of not having, fear of being left behind, fear of losing control, then the effort itself becomes the message. The body hears the urgency and translates it as, We are not okay yet. We are missing something. We are behind. That's the friction. Not the desire, not the dream. The friction is the way you hold it. In the competitor's language, the field doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your coherence. And in sleepy science terms, that coherence is simply what happens when your thoughts, your emotions, and your physiology stop arguing with each other. So, the goal isn't to erase doubt with louder affirmations. The goal is to lower the internal resistance that makes the doubt necessary. To stop demanding a new life from a nervous system that still thinks it's trapped in the old one. Because when you soften the bracing, when you release even a little of the white-knuckle grip, you don't become passive. You become readable. You become clear. And in a world that mirrors patterns with eerie precision, clarity is the opposite of friction. When people hear the phrase collapsing the timeline, it can sound like a dramatic trick, like you snap your fingers and the universe rearranges itself. But in the gentler, more practical sense we are using it tonight, it means something quieter. It means a choice becomes real. Not just in your imagination, not just in a journal entry. Real in the way your body starts to move differently. Your attention starts to select different details. Your habits start to point in a new direction. Until the path you're walking begins to diverge from the one you've been repeating. Think of your life as a hallway with many doors. Most days, you don't stand in the center and carefully choose. You drift toward the door that feels familiar, the door you've opened before, the door your nervous system recognizes. Even if it's not the door you want, it's the door your system expects. So, collapsing the timeline is the moment you stop drifting. It's the moment you stop letting old expectations pick the door for you. You choose one, and you choose it in a way that your whole system can follow. That's why this idea has nothing to do with pretending. In fact, pretending is usually what keeps people stuck. They try to act as if, with a tight smile, while their body quietly panics. They try to jump to the finish line in their mind, skipping the bridge their nervous system needs in order to feel safe crossing. A timeline doesn't collapse because you declare it. It collapses because you become consistent enough to live inside it. And consistency here doesn't mean perfection. It means coherence. Your thoughts are pointing one way, your emotions are not fighting them, and your actions, small, ordinary, almost boring actions, begin to match. So, what does that look like? If someone says they want abundance, the new timeline isn't a lottery win. The new timeline begins when they stop treating every expense like a threat, stop checking for disaster in every number, and start making choices from the steadier feeling of, I can handle this. That might show up as a simple habit, planning calmly, asking for fair value, investing in skills, showing up without self-sabotage, not flashy, just aligned. If someone wants love, the new timeline isn't the perfect person appearing like a movie scene. The new timeline begins when they soften the armor, when they stop scanning every interaction for rejection, when they practice being open in small ways, honest, present, emotionally available, without demanding immediate proof that it will work. That's a collapse. The old loop ends and a new loop begins. If someone wants health, the new timeline isn't a sudden transformation. It's when they stop living like their body is a problem to fix and start living like it's a companion to care for. They sleep, they move, they eat, they rest. Not as punishment, but as partnership. That shift, repeated, is what makes the future feel inevitable. This is why the competitor's framing lands. The external world doesn't change first. The internal signal changes first, and then reality, through attention, choices, timing, relationships, opportunity, starts to reorganize around the new pattern. Not because the universe is granting wishes, but because you're no longer feeding the old script with the same rehearsed reactions. So if collapsing the timeline has any magic in it, it's this. You stop asking life to prove it first. You become the proof, quietly, steadily, until the future you wanted stops being a fantasy and starts being the most natural next step. Picture an old radio on a nightstand. Not a sleek little app with perfect reception. An actual radio with a dial that turns slowly, with stations that drift in and out like ghosts. Sometimes you catch a clear melody, sometimes you catch nothing but hiss. And when you want a certain station, you can't negotiate with the radio. You can't flatter it. You can't threaten it. You can't shout, "Play jazz," while your dial is still parked on static. You have to tune. That's the cleanest way to understand the difference between signal and noise, and why so many people feel like they're doing manifestation while their lives keep echoing the same old patterns back. A signal is simple. It's coherent. It's one message held steadily long enough to be received. Noise is what happens when your system is broadcasting mixed instructions all at once. And most of us, without realizing it, live inside noise. We say we want peace, but we practice tension like it's a daily ritual. We say we want abundance, but we keep checking for danger. We say we want love, but we keep rehearsing loss. It isn't that these desires are wrong. The problem is that the dial is turned to a station that doesn't match them. In the competitor's language, the quantum field responds to your vibration, not your words. If we translate that into sleepy science, it's still pointing to something real. Your brain and nervous system are constantly broadcasting expectations through attention, emotion, posture, and behavior. Your body is not just along for the ride. Your body is part of the message. So when you whisper an affirmation that sounds pretty, but your jaw is clenched, that's noise. When you visualize a beautiful future, but your stomach drops like something bad is about to happen, that's noise. When you declare, "I trust," but you check for proof every 10 minutes, that's noise. The dial keeps slipping back to the old station. And the old station has familiar programming, control, monitoring, bracing, anticipating. It plays the same show every night, in different outfits. Here's a gentle truth. The radio doesn't care what you prefer. It responds to where you're tuned. And the tuning isn't a moral issue. It's not about being good or bad at this. It's simply the physics of attention and the biology of safety. When your nervous system doesn't feel safe, it will tune you to fear, because fear feels like information. Fear feels like preparation. Fear feels like doing something. And that's why trying harder often backfires. Trying harder can sound like effort, but underneath it's still the same frequency, urgency, lack, not yet, still missing, still behind. That energy is not a signal, it's static that masks the station you want. So how do you change it? Not by wrestling the radio, not by yanking the dial so hard it snaps. You change it the way you change any tuning. You make small adjustments, then you listen. You notice what gets clearer. You stay with what's clean. In human terms, that means you start paying attention to the places where your message splits. You might notice it when you say you want something, and immediately feel the need to explain why it probably won't happen. You might notice it when you take a step forward, and then punish yourself for taking it too slowly. You might notice it when you receive something good, and your first instinct is to scan for how it could disappear. Those are little flickers of noise, not failures, just indicators. Like the radio crackling and telling you, gently, you're close, but you're not quite on the station. And here's the viral level simplicity the competitor was hinting at. You don't need more techniques, you need a cleaner signal. A cleaner signal isn't louder, it's steadier. It's when your desire is held without desperation. It's when you stop checking the results as a way of soothing anxiety, because each check is also a broadcast. I don't believe it's coming. It's when you let the body soften first, so the message isn't being distorted at the source. This is why the radio metaphor matters. It turns manifestation from a performance into a practice of tuning. And tuning isn't dramatic. It's subtle. It's one small choice repeated, returning to clarity instead of spiraling into static. Because you can't receive a new station with the old dial. And the moment you begin to turn that dial, just a little, something starts to happen that feels almost unfair in its simplicity. The hiss quiets, the signal strengthens, and the life you've been chasing begins to sound a little more like home. There's a phrase that gets thrown around in quantum conversations, the observer effect. And the internet loves to turn it into a kind of spell, as if simply looking at reality hard enough can bend it into shape. But let's keep this both gentle and honest. At the level of everyday life, Observer doesn't have to mean a cosmic wizard. It can mean something much simpler, the part of you that selects what matters. Your attention is not passive, it's an editor. Out of the millions of sensory details pouring in, light, sound, memory, bodily sensation, your brain chooses a tiny fraction to spotlight. That spotlight becomes your experience, and your experience shapes your next choice, and your next choice shapes what happens next. So, in a science-safe way, the observer effect becomes a quiet truth about perception. What you consistently notice becomes what you live inside. If you've ever bought a new car and suddenly started seeing that same model everywhere, you felt it. The cars were always there. Your brain just didn't tag them as important until you had a reason. Attention changed the world you perceived, not by changing the streets, but by changing the filter. Now, apply that to the things you want. If you are tuned to scarcity, your observer is trained to find signs of not enough. It will highlight what's missing, what's late, what's uncertain, what could go wrong. It will treat neutral moments like warnings. It will magnify a small setback into a story. And once that story is running, your decisions follow it like sleepwalking. You don't take the chance. You don't send the message. You don't ask for the raise. You don't rest because rest feels unsafe. You don't trust the calm because the calm feels like the quiet before something bad. That's not weakness, that's conditioning. The observer, your attention, has been trained. And what's trained can be retrained. This is why the competitor's framing lands when they say, the wave doesn't collapse until it meets an observer. Even if we don't take that literally as physics, it points to something psychologically sharp. Possibilities remain open until your attention and behavior commit you to one track. Before you act, there are many versions of next. After you act, after you speak, after you choose, after you step forward, one version becomes real, and the others fade into the background. So, the real question isn't, can my mind control reality? The real question is, what does my attention keep choosing as real? Because attention doesn't just notice, it prepares. When you focus on threat, your body prepares for threat. Your muscles tighten, your breathing changes, your decisions become smaller, your time horizon shrinks. You become very good at surviving and very bad at receiving. When you focus on possibility, the body softens just enough to explore. You become more curious. You take slightly more intelligent risks. You can tolerate uncertainty without turning it into a catastrophe. You can hold the desire without strangling it. And this is where the idea of the observer becomes practical. Your observer is not only what you think, it's what you repeatedly return to. It's the pattern of where your mind goes when nobody is watching. It's the assumption you carry into rooms before anyone speaks. It's the quiet prediction you make about how things usually end. That prediction is powerful. Not because the universe obeys it like a command, but because you begin living in a way that makes it come true. If you predict rejection, you become guarded. If you predict failure, you hesitate. If you predict loss, you cling. And those behaviors create outcomes that look like proof. Then the observer says, see, I was right. A loop closes. So tonight, we're not asking you to think positive. That's just another form of forcing. We're asking for something softer. A different kind of observing without scanning, noticing without panicking, seeing your own thoughts as weather passing across the sky, rather than as instructions carved in stone. Because the moment you can watch a fear without obeying it, your observer changes. And when your observer changes, your choices change. And when your choices change, the hallway of doors begins to look different. The same world, a different filter. And that's the calm, science-safe meaning of the observer layer. Attention shapes experience, and experience shapes behavior, until behavior quietly shapes the life you call reality. In a moment, we'll go even deeper, because the observer isn't only your conscious mind. There's a quieter broadcaster underneath, and it has been choosing for you for a long time. Even when your conscious mind feels clear, when you can name what you want, when you can describe the life you're reaching for, there's another layer beneath it that may be voting in the opposite direction. And it doesn't vote with words, it votes with patterns. This is what the competitor meant by the subconscious broadcast. It's the signal that keeps transmitting when you're not trying, when you're not thinking, when you're just living on autopilot. It's the default setting your system returns to, like a device that resets itself to factory mode the moment you stop actively holding it. In sleepy science terms, your subconscious is not a mystical force. It's your brain's efficiency machine. It runs your habits. It protects you with shortcuts. It stores emotional learning. It keeps the body ready for the kinds of outcomes it expects. And because it's efficient, it doesn't wait for your conscious plans. It acts first. That's why someone can sincerely want love and still choose emotionally unavailable partners. They're not manifesting wrong. They're repeating a familiar map of safety. That's why someone can want abundance and still find themselves tightening up every time money enters the room. They're not lazy. Their nervous system is trained to expect loss. That's why someone can want peace and still feel restless the moment things get quiet. Because quiet can feel unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel unsafe, even when it's good. Here's the uncomfortable beauty of it. The subconscious doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your identity and your survival story. If your deep story says, "I have to struggle to deserve," then ease will feel suspicious. If your deep story says, "Good things don't last," then receiving will come with bracing. If your deep story says, "People leave," then closeness will trigger scanning. The mind can speak a dream out loud, but the body may still be living inside an old agreement. And the body is loud. Not loud in volume, loud in influence. Because the subconscious doesn't only live in thoughts. It lives in reactions, in micro movements, in the way you check your phone, in the way you interpret silence, in the way you rush to fix things before they break, in the way you reach for control without noticing your hand moving. It's the part of you that decides what you do when you're tired. And most of life is lived when you're tired. This is why affirmations can feel hollow. Not because words are useless, but because words can become a mask. You can repeat, "I am safe," while your shoulders stay lifted. You can say, "I am worthy," while your breath stays shallow. You can declare, "It's already mine," while your attention keeps hunting for proof like a detective convinced something is missing. That's the subconscious broadcast, the signal underneath the script. And the reason this matters is simple. Your day-to-day outcomes don't come from what you understand. They come from what you default to. A default is a groove. It's the groove you fall into when you're triggered. It's the groove you return to when something goes wrong. It's the groove you drift toward when nobody is cheering for you. So if your default groove is scarcity, you will keep making scarcity-shaped decisions even while reading abundance books. If your default groove is rejection, you will keep protecting yourself from rejection in ways that prevent intimacy while telling yourself you're ready. If your default groove is "I must prove myself," you will keep turning life into a test, even on days meant for rest. The competitor said something sharp. The subconscious always wins. That's true in a very ordinary way, because the subconscious is running the equipment. Conscious thought is like the person at the microphone. The subconscious is the soundboard. If the soundboard is set to distort, the message comes out distorted no matter how beautiful the words are. So, what do you do with that? Not war, not self-blame, not another aggressive self-improvement campaign. You start listening for the broadcast. You notice the recurring sentence that plays in the background, the one that doesn't feel like a thought. It feels like a fact. You notice the place your body tightens before your mind even explains why. You notice the reflex to measure, check, chase, prove, and brace. Because the moment you can name the pattern, you stop being possessed by it. And this is where the quantum metaphor becomes quietly useful. The moment you observe the program, you create a small gap, a choice point, a different possibility. Your conscious desire can be bright. It can be true. But until your deeper program stops transmitting the old station, you'll keep getting the same song, just with different lyrics. So, tonight we're not trying to overpower the subconscious. We're learning how to hear it, and gently, patiently, begin to retune it. There's a reason some affirmations feel like they bounce off you. Not because the words are wrong, And not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because words are only one layer of the signal. And sometimes the deepest layer, the one that actually steers the ship, doesn't speak in language at all. It speaks in felt state. In the competitor's world, they talk about heart and brain coherence. And they point to the idea that your emotional field carries information your mind can't fake. We can keep that spirit without turning it into a debate about measurements. In sleepy science terms, coherence simply means your attention, your breath, your emotion, and your body posture are not fighting each other. When those layers line up, you don't have to push so hard. You don't have to convince yourself. You don't have to keep restarting the engine every 10 minutes. You're already moving in one direction. Think about the difference between saying "I'm calm" and actually feeling calm. A person can say the first sentence with a tight jaw, shallow breathing, shoulders lifted like armor. But calm doesn't live in the sentence. Calm lives in the body. And the body is persuasive, not because it's magical, but because it's honest. Your nervous system is continuously sending status reports, safe or unsafe, open or defended, connected or isolated, steady or braced. That status report changes what you notice, what you remember, how you interpret tone, and what kinds of decisions feel possible. So, if you're trying to manifest with a mind-only approach, repeating the right phrases while your body stays in threat mode, you're asking your system to transmit two stations at once. The mind says, abundance. The body says, prepare for loss. The mind says, love. The body says, don't get hurt. The mind says, health. The body says, scan for danger. That mismatch is why people get exhausted. They're trying to think their way into a different life while their physiology is still living in the old one. This is where the heart-brain coherence idea becomes practical. It reminds you that feeling isn't decoration. Feeling is not the cherry on top of a mental technique. Feeling is the tuning. And heart here doesn't have to mean romance or spirituality. It can mean the emotional center of your experience, the part of you that knows instantly whether you're safe. It's the part that tightens when you don't trust. It's the part that softens when you do. It's the part that can't be fooled by a motivational quote. You can tell yourself, everything is fine, but your heart knows whether you believe it. You can say, I'm ready, but your body knows whether you're bracing. And when you're bracing, your choices shrink. You avoid, you over-control, you monitor results, you chase proof. Not because you lack discipline, because your system is trying to regulate itself. So, coherence is not about being high vibe all the time. That's a trap. Real coherence is quieter than that. It's the ability to return to a steady signal after you wobble. It's the ability to hold a desire without squeezing it. It's the ability to feel a fear without letting it drive. Here's a small way to understand it. Your brain is a brilliant planner. It loves maps, steps, strategies. Your heart, your felt state, is the weather you carry through the plan. If the weather is stormy, the best map in the world won't feel safe to follow. If the weather is clear, even a simple path becomes possible. That's why, in the competitor's framing, the quantum doesn't care about your words. If we translate that into everyday reality, people don't respond to what you say you are. They respond to what you radiate. Your presence, your steadiness, your tension, your openness. Opportunities don't arrive only through luck. They often arrive through the subtle way you show up, speak, listen, risk, and persist. And those things come from state. So when you hear, feel it before you see it, it doesn't mean you pretend you're already living your dream. It means you practice the internal posture that would be true in the version of you who's living it. A little more open, a little more grounded, a little less frantic. Not perfect, just more coherent. Because when your mind, your emotions, and your body finally agree, you stop broadcasting mixed messages. The signal steadies, and steady signals, over time, change what your life can receive. Most people think alignment is a mood. Like you either feel good or you don't. And if you don't, the whole thing is ruined. But alignment, in the way the competitor is really using it, is closer to a system, a three-part circuit. And the reason it matters is simple. Life responds most clearly when your signal isn't split into competing directions. So, let's name the 3 layers in the calmest, most practical way. Thoughts, emotions, actions. Not as a self-help slogan, more like 3 instruments in a small band. If they're playing the same song, the melody is obvious. If they're each playing something different, you get noise. Not evil noise, just confusion. Here's what it looks like when the layers disagree. Your thoughts say, I want change. Your emotions say, change is dangerous. Your actions say, stay small. That's not laziness, that's misalignment. Or, your thoughts say, I am worthy. Your emotions say, prove it. Your actions say, overwork, over-explain, over-give. That's a signal too. It's a signal of strain. Or, your thoughts say, I trust. Your emotions say, I'm bracing. Your actions say, check again, track again, control again. And then you wonder why life feels tight, why opportunities don't land, why you can't hold peace for very long. Because the system is broadcasting a split message. Now here's the gentle twist. Alignment is not about forcing all 3 layers to behave. That's just another version of control. Alignment is about making them face the same direction. Even if they're still imperfect, even if they still wobble. You don't need perfect positivity. You need coherence. Start with thoughts, because they're the easiest to notice. Thoughts are the words in your head, the story you repeat, the predictions you keep making. They're the mental channel. But thoughts alone are flimsy. Thoughts can say anything. Thoughts can imitate wisdom while the body is trembling. So the second layer, emotion, acts like truth serum. Emotion is the felt meaning behind your thoughts. It's the part that says, this is safe, or this is not safe, without needing to explain itself. Emotion is the tone of the message. And then the third layer, action, makes the broadcast real. Action is where your body votes. It's what you do repeatedly when nobody is impressed. It's the habits you return to. It's whether your choices match your stated desire. When all 3 line up, you become surprisingly powerful. Not in a dramatic way, but in a steady way. A calm kind of momentum appears, like gravity. Because a coherent system doesn't waste energy arguing with itself. Here's a simple example that stays close to the competitor's core idea. Imagine someone who wants abundance. If their thoughts are abundant, there's room for me. I can build something. I can receive. That's a start. But if their emotions are scarcity, tight chest, urgency, a constant sense of behind, then the message is mixed. And if their actions are distrust, checking numbers obsessively, panicking at small dips, refusing to invest in themselves, then the system is teaching the brain one lesson. We don't actually believe in abundance. So the field, the world, the feedback loop of life mirrors the dominant signal. More waiting, more strain, more proof chasing. Now, watch what alignment would look like, without pretending. Thoughts, I'm learning to build stability. I don't need this to happen overnight. Emotions, not fake bliss, just a softer baseline, a little more spaciousness, less panic. Actions, 1 or 2 small behaviors that match the signal. Consistent work, healthier boundaries, a calmer relationship with money. Nothing mystical happened. The system simply stopped canceling itself out. That's the engine. And the same engine applies to love, health, creativity, peace, anything. Thoughts give direction. Emotions give credibility. Actions give reality traction. When they conflict, you feel it. You feel scattered, tired, confused. Like you're driving with 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot on the brake. When they align, even slightly, you feel simpler, clearer, less noisy. And here's the point that makes this quantum in metaphor. When your system becomes coherent, you begin selecting a different set of outcomes. Not by wishing, by living as if the new outcome is the most natural thing in the world. That's why the competitor keeps saying it's so simple, yet nobody does it. Because alignment asks for honesty. It asks you to stop saying one thing, feeling another, and doing a third. It asks you to become readable to yourself first. And once you're readable, your life starts responding with the same clarity. Sometimes the easiest way to understand the signal is to watch it play out in real life, where nothing looks mystical and everything looks oddly precise. So, let's take 3 common desires people whisper to themselves late at night. Love, abundance, health, not as 3 separate problems, but as 3 mirrors that reveal the same hidden pattern. The difference between what you say you want and what your system is actually broadcasting. Love. A person can want love more than anything. They can read the books, learn the phrases, write the list, visualize the face, picture the warm kitchen light and the easy laughter. And yet, they keep landing in the same almost relationship, almost a connection, almost a match, almost a safe space. It starts so bright, the texts are steady, the chemistry feels real, the hope rises like warm air. And then, quietly, the old signal slips in. The heart stays guarded, the body stays braced. Not in obvious ways, sometimes in tiny ways. A delayed reply becomes a threat. A neutral tone becomes rejection. A simple boundary feels like abandonment. So, the person tightens. They overthink. They test. They pull away before they can be left. Or they cling before they can be forgotten. And now, without realizing it, their signal isn't love anymore. It's protection. It's prove you won't hurt me. It's don't get too close. That doesn't mean they're broken. It means their nervous system learned somewhere along the line that closeness can cost something. So, life mirrors it with painful accuracy. Connections that stay shallow, partners who can't meet them, relationships that feel just out of reach. Not punishment, precision. Love doesn't arrive in the timeline where your body is constantly preparing for a wound. It tends to arrive in the timeline where your system is learning, slowly, gently, to feel safe receiving. Abundance. Now look at abundance. Someone can want abundance and still live like abundance is dangerous. They say, I'm ready to receive, but their actions say, I don't trust it. They check their bank account the way someone checks a pulse in a panic. They refresh, as if the numbers will change because their fear is watching. They build a vision, and then they measure it to death. They set a goal, then scan for proof every hour that it's not working. And what does that broadcast? It broadcasts scarcity vigilance. It broadcasts lack is the truth, and I need constant evidence to feel safe. And again, this isn't failure of willpower, it's physiology. It's the survival brain doing what it's designed to do: monitor resources, track threats, reduce uncertainty. But the side effect is subtle. When you treat life like it's always about to fall apart, you begin making choices that match that world. You hesitate. You hoard. You avoid investing in yourself. You say no to opportunities that require patience. You burn out trying to force fast results. So, the timeline you experience becomes one of constant chasing, because your system is tuned to the station called not enough. Abundance in the competitor's framing isn't something you beg for. It's something you become coherent with. Not with fake confidence, just with a calmer baseline that says, I can build, I can receive, I can wait without panicking. Health. And then there's health. This one is especially tender because people often genuinely want relief. They want to feel better. They want to trust their body again. But the habit becomes this: scanning, checking, monitoring symptoms like a detective who expects bad news. Every sensation becomes a story. Every ache becomes a forecast. Every tired day becomes a verdict. So the mind says, I want health. But the body learns, my body is a problem to solve. And when your attention keeps selecting danger, your nervous system stays activated. Stress chemistry stays elevated. Sleep gets lighter. Recovery gets harder. And now the signal becomes, something is wrong. Even if nothing severe is wrong, your system can still be stuck in the timeline of threat. So, health becomes a distant country you're always traveling to, but never arriving in because you're carrying the airport security line inside your chest. The shift isn't pretend you're fine. It's slower than that. It's learning to stop treating your body like an enemy. It's learning to listen without panic. It's learning to care without fear. Oh, the shared thread. Love, abundance, health. 3 different words, one hidden engine. When your thoughts aim one way, but your emotions and actions aim another, the message scrambles. And the world doesn't mirror your best intentions. It mirrors your dominant frequency, your default state, your automatic settings. That's why this can feel unfair until you realize it's actually consistent. Because it means you don't need to perform. You don't need to hack reality. You don't need a perfect ritual. Like, you need one thing, a clearer signal. And clarity is often just this: less gripping, less bracing, less chasing proof, more steadiness, more honesty, more coherence, moment by moment, until the timeline you want starts to feel normal enough to live in. In the quiet hours, the control trap doesn't feel like a trap at all. It feels like responsibility. It feels like being smart, being careful, staying ahead, keeping your hands on the wheel because you learned, somewhere along the line, that if you loosen your grip, life might swerve. And that's why the simplest approach can feel so unnatural. Not because it's hard, but because it asks you to stop doing the one thing your nervous system has been trained to call safety. Control. Most people don't struggle with manifestation because they lack vision boards or affirmations or motivation. They struggle because their system is running a silent equation. If I monitor it, I can manage it. If I manage it, I can prevent pain. If I prevent pain, I can finally relax. So they monitor, they check the inbox, they check the account, they check the relationship temperature, they check their body for symptoms, they check the signs, they check the timeline. And every check comes with a small, invisible message. It's not here yet. It's not safe yet. We're still waiting. That's the trap, because the mind thinks it's being productive, while the deeper system is broadcasting a frequency of doubt. It's a strange thing about humans. We can say, "I trust," with our lips, while our stomach is clenched like a fist. We can repeat, "It's already mine," while our attention keeps snapping back to the empty space where proof should be. And attention is not neutral. Attention is a spotlight. It doesn't just notice reality, it teaches your brain what reality is. If you keep shining the spotlight on what's missing, your mind begins to organize itself around missing. Your body starts to live as if missing is the truth. Your choices quietly shrink to match it. So, the control trap is not just a mindset, it's a whole body posture toward life. A posture of bracing. And bracing has a cost. When you're braced, you don't receive clearly. You don't act cleanly. You don't even want cleanly. Wanting turns into needing. Needing turns into tension. Tension turns into noise. This is where the competitor's core idea becomes almost painfully simple. Forcing is friction. And control is a kind of force. It's force disguised as planning. Force disguised as being realistic. Force disguised as "I'm just trying to make sure." But the field, however you choose to think of it tonight, as possibility, as probability, as the wide open menu of what could happen next, doesn't respond well to a scrambled signal. It responds to coherence. And nothing scrambles you faster than the habit of checking for proof before you've changed the channel inside yourself. Think about the moments in your life when something did arrive with ease. Not because you were lazy, not because you didn't care, but because you weren't gripping it so tightly that you crushed the very space it needed to land. Maybe you met someone on an ordinary day when you weren't hunting. Maybe you got an opportunity when you weren't refreshing the page. Maybe an idea clicked when you finally stopped trying to wrestle it into existence. Those moments often share one quiet ingredient. You weren't measuring your way into it. You were available. You were open enough to notice, calm enough to respond, clear enough to move. The control trap, on the other hand, turns life into a lab where you keep running the same experiment with the same nervous system and hoping the results change. It says, "I'll relax when I see progress. I'll trust when it works. I'll feel safe when it arrives." But this is the backwards spell, because arriving is often downstream of the state you practice before there's evidence. And the mind hates that. The mind wants guarantees. It wants steps. It wants a contract signed by the universe. So it begins to micromanage. It starts looking at the clock while the water is still heating and calling the kettle broken. It checks the soil every hour and wonders why the seed hasn't become a tree. And then, because the mind is clever, it calls that anxiety discipline. But underneath, it's the same ancient story. if I don't stay vigilant, I'll lose something. That's why simplicity feels unnatural. Simplicity sounds like surrender, and surrender sounds like danger to a system that learns survival through effort. So instead, people stay busy. They perform change without becoming it. They declare abundance while living in scarcity habits. They claim love while scanning for rejection. They affirm health while treating their body like a problem to solve. Not because they're wrong, because they're human. Because the control trap is persuasive. It whispers, "Don't stop, don't soften, don't let go, you'll fall behind." But here's the quieter truth that starts to unwind the trap. Letting go is not giving up. Letting go is reducing noise. Letting go is loosening the white-knuckle grip that makes your signal shake. Because a shaky signal doesn't just feel bad, it creates confusion in action. When you're gripping, you over-text, you over-explain, you over-correct. You say yes when you mean no, because you're afraid to lose the chance. You take rush steps, not aligned steps, because waiting feels intolerable. And then you look back and think, why do I keep ending up here? The trap is not that you wanted something. The trap is that you tried to control the moment it would prove you were safe. And that's the pivot for tonight. What if the goal isn't to control the outcome, but to become the clearest signal for the outcome? Not perfect, not constant, not high vibe all day. Just clearer. Clearer means your attention isn't split between I want this and I don't believe it. Clearer means your body isn't broadcasting panic while your mouth recites confidence. Clearer means you're not living as a person who is still waiting to be chosen by life. Because the control trap is, at its core, a waiting room. And the doorway out of it is not a new technique. It's a new relationship with uncertainty, a willingness to practice trust without demanding immediate evidence, a willingness to act from the version of you who already belongs in the timeline you want, without needing the timeline to prove it first. That's why simplicity feels rare. It asks you to do the bravest, strangest thing, to stop chasing the feeling of arrival and start living like you're already on the way. And the moment your grip loosens, even slightly, your signal steadies. Not because reality is a vending machine, but because you become easier to guide, easier to move, easier to meet. The field doesn't need you to fight it. It needs you to be readable. And the tightest grip in your life might be the very thing making you feel stuck. There's a quiet misunderstanding that keeps people stuck. They think coherence means feeling good all the time, like a perfectly smooth lake, never rippling, like a mind that never worries, like a heart that never tightens. But that isn't real life. Real life has messages. It has moments that pinch. It has surprises that spike the system for a second, sometimes for a day. And if you treat every uncomfortable feeling as a failure, you end up doing something far louder than fear itself. You start fighting your own inner weather. That's where bypassing begins. Bypassing sounds spiritual, but it's actually mechanical. You slap bright words on top of a nervous system that's still braced. You say, "I'm abundant," while your attention is scanning for proof. You say, "I'm loved," while your body is waiting for the next disappointment. You say, "I'm healthy," while you're listening for danger. It's not dishonest. It's human. It's the mind trying to outrun the body. And the body doesn't get convinced by speeches. The body gets convinced by safety. So the recalibration we're talking about tonight isn't about becoming shiny. It's about becoming honest and then returning to clarity without turning that honesty into a story of doom. Because there's a difference between, "I feel tight right now," and "this means nothing works for me." One is a signal. The other is noise. A calm recalibration begins with the smallest kind of courage, naming what's present without dramatizing it. Not as a confession, as a measurement. I notice fear. I notice rushing. I notice that thin, restless feeling in my chest. When you name it, you stop blending with it. You stop becoming it. In neuroscience terms, you're giving your experience a label, moving it from a raw storm into something the thinking brain can hold. In plain terms, you're turning on a light in the room. The shadow doesn't vanish, but it becomes less monstrous. Then comes the next step, and it's almost too simple for the mind to respect. You soften the body first, because your body is the transmitter, And a transmitter that's clenched will broadcast distortion, even if your words are beautiful. Softening can be microscopic. It doesn't have to be theatrical. It can be a single decision that says, I'm not in danger in this moment. You let your jaw unclench by 1 degree. You unhook your tongue from the roof of your mouth. You let your shoulders drop a fraction, like you're setting down a bag you forgot you were carrying. These are not tricks, they're signals. They tell the nervous system, stand down. And once the system begins to stand down, the message you're trying to live becomes readable again. There's one more piece here that matters, because a lot of people can soften for 10 seconds, and then snap right back into the old loop. They soften, then immediately check the world to see if it worked. That's the control trap returning through a side door. So instead of checking the world, you check your direction. You ask quietly, what would clarity do next? Not what would panic do next. Not what would prove I'm safe do next. Not what would impress someone do next. Just clarity. Sometimes clarity means taking one small action. Sometimes it means resting. Sometimes it means a clean boundary. Sometimes it means drinking water, eating something simple, and stopping the mental sprint. This is the part most manifestation content skips. The nervous system loves small, consistent returns. It learns through repetition, not inspiration. So, coherence isn't a magical state you achieve once. It's a rhythm you practice, a drift and a return. A drift into worry, then a return to breath, to softness, to honest naming. A drift into impatience, then a return to the next small aligned step. A drift into self-criticism, then a return to gentler language. And if you're thinking, but what if my feelings are heavy tonight? That's okay. Coherence is not pretending the heaviness isn't there. Coherence is letting the heaviness be there without letting it steer. Picture your mind like a night sky. Feelings are weather moving across it. Clouds, fog, brief lightning far away. You don't need to chase the clouds away to prove the sky is real. You just need to remember you are the sky. So, when the day has left residue on you, the recalibration is not a performance. It's a return to truth. I'm feeling something, and I'm still safe. And I can choose my next frequency anyway. That's not bypassing. That's regulation. And regulation is what makes your signal steady enough to be answered, not by miracles, but by the simple physics of a calmer mind, making cleaner choices, again and again, until the new timeline starts to feel like home. Most people assume change happens in one dramatic moment, some grand decision, some perfect routine, some sudden new me. But the way a signal actually becomes stable is quieter than that. It becomes stable the way a radio station becomes clear, not by wrestling the dial, but by returning to the same small alignment again and again, until the static stops feeling like home. So, let's turn this into a simple loop you can live inside, morning, day, and night, like 3 gentle checkpoints in a single orbit. In the morning, before your world rushes in, choose your frequency first. Not a to-do list, not a motivational speech, just a short inner setting, something you can carry without effort. Maybe it's, I move with ease today. Maybe it's, I listen before I react. Maybe it's, I don't chase, I align. The key is that you choose it before you start measuring your life, before you check notifications, before you check for proof. It's like laying a track down in front of the train, small, quiet, directional. Then the day happens as it always does. And the practice isn't staying perfect. The practice is noticing drift early, before it becomes a storm. Use your body like a compass. When you feel that familiar tightening, jaw, chest, shoulders, stomach, treat it like an indicator light on a dashboard. It doesn't mean you're broken, it means the system is bracing. And when you catch it, you don't need a ritual. You only need a return, a softer face, a slower exhale, a small question. What would clarity do next? Not forever, just next. That's how you stop broadcasting from urgency. That's how you keep your message clean, even while life stays messy. And then comes night, the most underrated part of the loop, because night is where you teach your subconscious what the day meant. If you end the day by replaying every mistake, You feed the old transmitter: struggle, not enough, danger, delay. But if you end the day with gentle precision, without lying, you send a different summary signal. You can ask softly, where did I drift? And where did I return? Even one return counts. And then add one clean note of gratitude, not as a performance, but as data. One real thing: a kind text, a good meal, a quiet moment, the simple fact that you made it through another day. This is how the loop works. Morning sets the station, day catches the drift, night writes the story your nervous system will carry into tomorrow. Not forcing, not chasing, just tuning, returning, and letting the signal become familiar enough that your life starts to reflect it back. Even when you're doing everything right on the inside, your signal is never living in a vacuum, because humans don't regulate alone. We borrow calm from calm people. We borrow urgency from urgent rooms. We take the emotional temperature of a space the way a body takes the temperature of water, quietly, automatically, without asking permission. That's co-regulation. It's not mystical. It's simply how nervous systems learn what normal feels like. If your days are filled with sharp voices, constant breaking news, endless scrolling, and conversations that orbit fear, your body starts to treat tension like home. And then, even when your mind tries to manifest a new timeline, the deeper system keeps broadcasting the old station. Watch out, brace, hurry, prove. But the opposite is also true. A single steady friend can soften a whole week. A peaceful corner of your home can change the way you speak to yourself. A playlist, a quiet walk, a group chat that's kind instead of cynical. These things aren't extras. They're the field conditions. And fields matter. In physics, a field is the invisible context that shapes what's allowed to happen. In your life, environment is the invisible context that shapes what state you can hold without effort. So, think of field hygiene as gentle selection. Not isolation, not toxic positivity. Just choosing inputs that don't scramble your coherence. You can ask simple questions. Does this account leave me clearer or more restless? Does this person widen my breath or tighten it? Does this room help me slow down or speed up? Small choices add up. The nervous system is a student, and it's always taking notes. That's why community matters too. Not because someone else can do your work, but because shared safety is a shortcut to steadiness. When you're around people who speak with care, who don't reward panic, who don't turn every moment into a test, your body relearns a softer baseline. And from that baseline, your intentions stop feeling like a battle. They start feeling like a setting. So, if you've been trying to change your inner world by sheer willpower, consider this a quieter lever. Curate what surrounds you. Protect the signal. Choose the rooms, the voices, the rhythms that teach your system what safe sounds like. Because in the end, you don't just tune yourself, you tune with the world. And now, as we come to the edge of the hour, you don't have to do anything with what you've heard. You don't have to turn it into a project. You don't have to prove you understood it. You don't have to chase the right feeling or wrestle your mind into silence. Tonight is allowed to be simple, because the signal we've been talking about isn't something you manufacture with effort. It's something you return to, like a familiar frequency you've visited before, even if you forgot the way back for a while. So, here's a gentle invitation, just one word, not a goal, not a promise. A word you can carry like a small, warm stone in your pocket this week. Maybe it's ease, maybe it's allow, maybe it's clarity, maybe it's soften, maybe it's trust. Let that word be the dial. Not the whole radio, just the dial. And if you'd like to, leave that one word in the comments. I love seeing what this community is choosing, all across different nights and different time zones. It's a quiet way of reminding your nervous system, I'm not doing this alone. If this kind of sleepy science storytelling helps you unwind, if it gives your thoughts a softer place to land, you can gently like the video and subscribe to the Quantum Slumber. Not out of pressure, just so you can find this space again whenever you need it. And now, you can let the lesson fade into the background. No forcing, No fixing. Just a slow return to the simplest thing, being here and letting the world be a little quieter than it was a few minutes ago. May your mind loosen its grip. May your body remember what safe feels like. May your one word become a calm thread running through tomorrow, without you having to pull on it. Thank you for spending this hour with me. Good night, and let yourself drift. You don't have to chase anything now. Just tune and rest.